Hey, you guys. I hope you're all doing well today. For today's classics chat, I wanted to talk about Lady Chatterley's Lover. So, I read this book a couple of months back and I've been processing it in my head ever since because I've been trying to understand what D.H. Lawrence actually did with this book. And I thought it's worth, having a talk about it and chat about it. So if you have read Lady Chatterley's Lover, drop me a comment below and we can discuss about it. If you haven't, then most of this video will be spoiler free. And towards the end, I'll mark the point where I talk about spoilers. So you can be safe that you haven't really got spoiled. So starting off with D.H. Lawrence per se. So every author has like a different genre or a concept with which they write in classics. So if you think about Dickens, it's mostly about life and the growth of life. Whereas if you talk about, say, Jane Austen, it's mostly about empowerment and women and in that era, and mostly the women breaking a lot of these untold forsaken rules. And I felt like with D.H. Lawrence, it was mostly about self awareness and self actualization for a woman. And at that time, I think when this novel was written, it was kind of forbidden, or it wasn't really it was taboo and it was not talked about as much. And I come to understand that is one of the reasons why that this book was banned when it was written at that point. So in fact, it was so banned that I had difficulty procuring the book to actually read it, and that actually made me want to read it more. And I couldn't find it in any of the offline stores. I tried online and I've only found like these random editions, one or two of those, which I wasn't really keen on buying because it wasn't worth it. And then I found a friend who actually had stocked up this book as part of the book collecting nook. And I immediately said I wanted to read it, and then I did. And I've returned the book now, so I don't have it in hand with me, but we're still going to talk about it. First of all, this book comes with a lot of triggers. So, if you're like a beginner and you want to try reading a classic, I would not recommend this book. If you are an avid reader and you read a lot of classics, I still would recommend that you look at the trigger warnings before picking up this book, because a lot of it may not bode well with a lot of people, and each to each their own. Some of them may be okay with it, some of them may be not. So it's best to understand what this book is about before you pick it up. Now, the plot of this book is about our Lady Chatterley. Well, initially, in the start of the book, she falls in love and she marries this army person who comes back from the army, and they get married, and he's a lord, so she becomes lady. And then, in one of the deputations, he gets amputated, and so he comes back in a wheelchair. And for some reason, there becomes a lot of distance between the two of them. So they live like a married couple, but they are literally like roommates. They don't have anything between them. They don't, maybe in some level they love each other, but it's not really explicitly mentioned in the book. So there are different arrangements that they do, as in, for example, Lottie tells the lady that if she wants to have a child, then she can do it outside of the marriage, but he's okay to call the child as his so that they have a heir to their mansion. So she moves to this like mansion in somewhere in some remote part of England, which is like a huge manor, and she feels all lonely and she feels alone. And then she befriends a gamekeeper who recently joins them, and she immediately it gets attracted to him. So the rest of the story is mostly around her going out with this gamekeeper. Like basically, she ends up having an affair with him, but the well, her husband would only be okay if the person that she has a child with is of their similar stature and not anybody remotely below them. But at that point in time, in that era, I think it was mostly about the casteism, the classism, everything of that aspects were also explored in this book. So because the gamekeeper is of a lower class and she is a lady, her relationship is very taboo with the gamekeeper. So the book explores lots of concepts, especially about affairs outside of marriage, casteism, classism, even about women and their own self awakening at that point in time. So she learns a lot of things that she possibly wouldn't ever have if she had been with the Lord. And so it talks about various subjects like this, but very subtly. So when you read the book, you feel like you're just reading a normal book, but then you happen to come across all of these different elements that are subtly put in the book, and then you start thinking, really? What was this about? And I also feel like the book was banned at that point because I guess it nobody was okay with that much of smut. But I think in this time in the book industry, there are so many books which have way too much smut that this makes it look very trivial. And if you read this book, then you're not going to feel that smutty at all, because there are other books which have really been released in the last few years that have been way more smuttier than this. So maybe if this book was released now, then it would not have been so controversial. But at that point in time, this book was really, really controversial. The whole aspect of the book revolves around all of these elements, and I felt so drawn to the characters despite all of their flaws. So you know that these people are doing maybe something wrong, or they're doing something that is not ideal for a society, or it's not actually how it should be, but then you end up investing yourself in all of these characters. So I think that that part of the story was so beautifully written, and the flow of the book is also so easy, and you can easily go through it. I guess the only point is the gamekeeper is from somewhere south of Ireland, I think, and so the accent was really difficult to follow at that time because they have a really deep accent, and in the book, that deep accent, maybe in the 1900s, was so much different than what it is right now. So that was one bit of a bummer, but I think it was really interesting to see all these different elements also bring about in this book so casually that you don't necessarily feel like it's been forced into the book. So I thought that was also really, really, really amazing. Whenever you read classics, you feel like you've been transported into this like whole different universe which doesn't exist right now, and you feel lost in that world. And I think in this book also that same feeling happened. So D.H. Lawrence is like I guess another brilliant classic author, and even though a lot of the different classic authors get a lot of recognition, D.H. Lawrence is not that prevalent, at least on booktube that I've seen. And so if the based on the trigger warnings, if you're still okay to like go ahead and read the book, then I think you should, because it's a great book to like have read. This is the part where I talk about the spoilers. So eventually, what does happen is her husband does find out when she goes on a trip to Paris, and she gets pregnant with the gamekeeper's baby, and then he confronts the gamekeeper, and then she comes back. I think the whole plot around how everyone wants to protect her, but she still wants to do what she wants to do, and what she wants to feel, what she wants to feel was also very talked about at that point, because I don't think in that era women really got to take those chances or make those decisions. It was all made by their parents, or made by, especially if you're from royalty or from you're like a lady or a lord, you don't necessarily get to take a lot of those decisions. But she actually stood her ground, and she decided what she wanted to do, and she made her choices. And I think those elements in the book, written by a male author, I think that is brilliant, because you don't necessarily see that very often. And I thought that was very exploratory at that point in time. So eventually she leaves, she asks for a divorce, and then she leaves the manor. Her husband doesn't give her a divorce because he doesn't understand what all of this is, and how she could even fall below her class, and things like that. And then eventually she moves away from him, hoping that the distance would give him some time to think about it, and then later give her a divorce. And then eventually at some point in time, her gamekeeper, well, he obviously gets fired from his job, so he moves to his county house in Ireland, and then she goes there to meet him, and then they finally live together and live happily ever after. So the story kind of in the end it all turns out fine, but then there's a lot of turbulences, a lot of things that you hope wouldn't have happened. And I know at every juncture in the book, you keep thinking, oh, this is wrong, oh, this is wrong, oh, this is wrong. But they still keep going on because it doesn't necessarily talk about what happens, but more about the plot. So the plot is written in such a way that you don't get invested in the plot, but you get more invested in the character. And I think that is something brilliant that doesn't happen very often. And so that is another amazing way to think about how this book was written. So if you ever get a chance to read Lady Chatterley's Lover, make sure you check the trigger warnings. This book is not for teens, not for young adults. It's only for adults. And as an adult, if you are very exploratory in your classics and you do feel that these trigger warnings are okay for you, then go ahead and read this book. It's a great book to read, by the way. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this classics chat, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe, and I will see you in another video. Bye.